Listen to the people.
You thought I was kidding.
Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. 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 Parrot TV.
The literary. Hello, welcome to World Inkers Network, a Parrot TV program. Today we have Frederic Iriarte and Igor Goldkind to discuss the collaboration album Breathless. And this is a wonderful program. You can watch some of our other programs on Parrot TV at our station on YouTube. And I want to thank Angie Mack for our jingle again. Wonderful song, and it's catchy, and we love it. So thank you so much, Angie. And so just to kick things off, let's let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit and talk about your, your collaboration effort, Breathless, and other albums that you've done together. So we can get started with, I guess, Igor. Would you like to talk a little bit about yourself?
Not really, but I'll introduce
Just
myself.
your artistic, your artistic efforts.
Yeah. Well, my name is Igor Goldkind, Goldkind. I'm an author, educator. I come from the publishing industry, from the comics industry, and I've been working with artists. I've been collaborating with artists, both visual and audio, all of my life. I write words. I don't play an instrument, and I don't draw, but I like collaborating with both visual and audio artists. Mm-hmm. Beginning with text, beginning with the idea of kind of uncovering the meaning of words and where words come from. And I would qualify, not to get too didactic, but I'd qualify that most of our use of language, especially in the Anglo-American environment, is really about transactional phrases where we're exchanging things. And right. That is exchanging information, exchanging prices, trying to transact values, and there is a profounder root to language, which has to do with its aesthetic, and for that reason, I try to demonstrate this through poetry and lyricism, and try to get back to kind of a more fundamental and even primitive use of language.
Wow, very interesting. So, Frederic, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, my name is Frederic Iriarte, and I live in Sweden, outside Stockholm, but I'm French, and I've been living here about 30 years now. I meet Igor Goldkind on the net when he was telling his poetry, reciting his poetry. And then I was thinking, wow, I was an interesting person. And then it's through the National and International Beat Poetry Foundation that I get introduced, because I was very interested about poetry. And since then, we have done already 3 albums. One album, it's the last album, this is Breathless. But those one before, it was Take a Deep Breath and Viral Monologues. So we have been working during the Corona a lot of at this time too. And it was through videos and music and art and painter. I'm a painter and designer too.
There's a kind of in these 3 titles, just an observation, a focus on breath or on life processes. I'm curious about that. And it seems to go back to what Igor was saying about language, the root of language, maybe. That's interesting that you guys are kind of experimenting with that thought.
Well, let me expand on that a little, or contract on that idea. Oftentimes, when I talk to people about language, I ask them, well, who taught you how to read? Who taught you how to speak? Who taught you what the meaning of the words you use are? And generally, most of us say, well, our parents, our teachers, and all that. Yeah, but who taught them? And then who taught them? And who taught? And if you look at that context, you understand that language is a transmission. It's a river that flows from almost the origin all the way back to the very first people who made noise to express intention. And there is an unbroken connection, unbroken cord that goes through literally millennia up to where we are now. I mean, the words I'm using don't belong to me.
Right.
I use them, and they belong to a space, a collective space that dates back to the origins of consciousness. How about that?
And it makes me think a little bit about Jerome Rothenberg's ethnopoetics to an extent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of my work is reactionary. In other words, I react. I'm in opposition to most things. I'm in opposition to the narrow usage of language. American English is very different than British English, for example, and the French have a different emphasis in terms of their semiotics, in terms of the types of things that you can describe in French that you wouldn't necessarily describe in English. And the same is true with Italian, with Spanish, with different languages. But we have been, mainly due to the proliferation of technology and the internet, we've kind of conformed to a certain type of linguistic expression. It is transactional, it is informational, and it's as if we'd forgotten the breadth of language, and now it's all down to technical manuals and what you can, and how keyword rich your copy is.
Right.
So it's that functionality that I'm rebelling against, because language is it's an aesthetic. Language is a medium, just as paint or dance or movement is. It's a medium of human expression. And today I feel that language has been marginalized down to it really just being the value of its function.
Right.
What is fascinating me in Igor's poetry, it's right in time. It's when we work, it was happening things, between COVID and the war and this and that, and then we connected directly with the actual time we live in too. So I think it's a mark of important mark of the time we're living in, and I like it. Yeah.
The times we're living in are almost a just to get kind of sinister and conspiracy level. It's almost a time in which meaning is being undermined. We are no longer looking at the full resonance of the meaning of the words that we use. We're looking at narrower and narrower articulations. Ones that have a political bias, ones that have a functional bias. We're turning into a species of engineers, instruction manuals, as opposed to expressive artistic beings. And I'm not going to like do a liberal arts thing here, but the emphasis on, say, STEM culture now, and STEM is a culture. The idea that the quantification of data, the quantification of reality, is the ultimate aim, is usually within, and it's all dating all the way back to Aristotle. It's usually balanced with quality and quantity. You look at a quantitative evaluation of data, but you also look at a qualitative evaluation of experience. And this seems to be diminishing in value. We no longer emphasize the humanities in our education system. We no longer believe that there's real value in art, we look at artists as if they were school children. They're just people who just play all the time.
Right.
And,
they cannot control themselves.
and this
I
is
agree
so
with that.
counter. This is so counter the history of Western civilization, in which, we've always valued aesthetics and science within equal measure, because we look at our actual experience, and as participants in our experience, we are emotionally engaged, and how we feel about our experience affects the actual result of our experience, what we can quantify. So I see this as kind of almost a brainwashing alienation. We're becoming, we're raising generations of children that are taught to devalue they're taught to fight for their emotions, but not to actually understand them, and not understand their own feelings as significant environmental, data, as stuff that needs to be examined, needs to be looked into in terms of experiential reality. Now it's all data.
You sound like a computer, artificial intelligence a little bit.
Right. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it's the whole Terminator, when are the robots going to take over kind of scenario. I always like to respond, well, they don't have to. We surrendered. We're already dehumanizing ourselves so that we can be quantified. And if we're quantified in terms of our interests, which is what Amazon's all about, our attitudes, if we could be quantified, then we can be controlled.
Yes.
And what happens is the natural human spirit is alienated from that. And I believe, and this is a radical thing to say, I believe that's why we have so many young people taking their own lives, because they no longer feel that they fit on the spreadsheet. They don't fit. Their individual experiences, their unique human experiences, no longer are quantifiable, and so they don't fit.
Well, if we're living beings, I think it's important to justify our experiences and our emotions. And if we, if, as you said, that life itself is precious, at least in my opinion, I believe it really is.
Yeah.
And to recognize that each person is a unique, a human, and the humanist principle that our emotions are
valid.
Valid. Exactly.
Emotions are facts.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm angry. Now, I may have cause to be angry, or you could judge whether I have reason to be angry or not. But the fact is I'm angry. The fact is I'm sad. The fact is that's reality. Whether it's justified or not is not the issue.
Right.
And as I said, circling back again, the problem is that we're expecting our young people, especially more and more, to dismiss the idiosyncrasy of their individuality and conform to a spreadsheet, to where, how do you feel, how depressed are you today on a scale of 1 to 10? I mean, how many people who have entered into any kind of therapeutic or, scenario are constantly being asked to quantify their deepest, most profound emotions?
But that's what I call the other reality a little bit. I wanted to ask you a little bit, Igor, about the science of irrealism, the other reality. There is a reality, so like you said, facts, it's reality.
Yes.
And there is the other emotional state, it's unreal, irrealism then. And you wrote a very beautiful essay about the science of irrealism, and I think you catch it, the idea.
Thank
very
you.
well.
Well, thank you for complimenting the essay, but I mean, it's a general idea, and again, I don't like ownership of ideas, and it's one reason I like collaborating with people like Frederic. Is that Frederic's? I've never met him personally, but he's on the other side of the world to me, and yet through his own experiences and his own path, his own aesthetic path, he's reached some of the same conclusions I have. So these ideas are fluid. They don't belong to anybody. They're not Microsoft trademarks. They flow in a collective sea of our culture and our consciousness, and the history of how we have tried to cope with who we are and how we are. When you're talking about irrealism, I like. I don't like to say that there are two worlds, but it seems like there are.
Yes.
I don't buy into the Marvel metaverse. I mean, it's about perception. It's not about, there is only one world. However, because of the way we are taught and socialized to engage with the world, it is perceived as two. And the split is between the collective world of signage, of language, of agreement, of consensus, of traffic laws. You know, most of us function within this world. I call it the real world. The real world is, you know, what did you get paid? You know, how much do you get paid for this? How do you survive? How do you engage with authority? What traffic laws, you know, do you know the traffic laws? Do you know what that sign means? It's the world, the real world is also the world of advertising messages and how we're told to feel about ourselves and our identities.
Yeah,
The
but if
other
you
world,
use it artistic way, so it's not an advertising, it's a message.
it's a message signal-based world. It's a world of signage. The problem is that we've forgotten that signage refers to something. A sign points at something else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it seems like there are two worlds, because the world that Frederic is talking about is what I call the actual world. And the actual world is the one that we keep pointing at, but don't engage with. We are taught to engage with the real world because that's where we can be stratified. We have status, we have income, we have, a name, we have numbers, we have data about it. We can be quantified in the real world.
Yeah.
But the actual
You
world.
wrote a poetry about that, the number games.
I wrote a piece. We did a piece together called The Numbers Game, which is just at the end of it, the punchline is, well, you're not your name anymore. You're your numbers.
Yeah.
And anybody who's forgotten their password knows what I mean.
Yeah. But something which was very concrete our collaboration, that we succeed to show a very interesting video with a French painter, Katarina Andersson, of the war in Ukraine, and we have been part of the Ukraine peace letter to Ukraine with video and poetry, and we show it at the Torrance Art Museum in Los Angeles. I think it was a very good way to action to use our power or artistic power and to tell people things. Yeah. So art is not only irrealism, like I want to come back to realism. Art is not something in another word. Art is as well concrete too.
Later today. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, I agree with Fred. I mean, part of the purpose of collaboration isn't just convenience; it's also intentional. Because I believe that we exist in a climate in which there's a crisis of truth. There's for political and social reasons, there's been an undermining of certainty, of what we know to be true. How do we know something to be true? And the only way we can get to a truth of, say, the actual world, as opposed to the world of signage, as opposed to the symbolic world, is through different vantage points. The whole concept of the metaverse is not that there aren't many different possibilities, it's that there are many different vantage points. And every consciousness has its own vantage point on the same event. So during the invasion of the Ukraine, which was the most aggressive military human act since World War II, we had suddenly, Frederic is in his position, his vantage point, which is very much nearer the Russian border. And I'm coming from an American vantage point in which the concern is more distant, and also, well, how much money are we going to spend there? So there are all these different vantage points that, if perceiving the truth can be arrived at about an event if the more vantage points can be entertained. The more that we can see things from different points of view, the more likely we're able to arrive at some kind of accuracy.
So I'm going to play the track here, Breathless, and hopefully we'll have some time afterwards to continue this discussion. I think we will. So here we go with this.
Breathless.
I'm sorry, is this the one?
Take a deep breath.
The foul bone, or is this
Hold it. Hold it. Keep holding it. Continue holding it. Hold it until you have used everything you have taken in. Everything you know. Everything you've seen. Everything you hold precious and dear. Keep holding it all in until you are exhausted, until you are out of breath, and desperately need to take another one. But don't. Gasp before you pass out. Now, you are breathless. If you don't breathe, you die. If you hold your breath, you'll pass out before you die. If a man presses his knee against your neck, you will die. Your body makes decisions your mind cannot overrule. Between your private inner world and the cold, indifferent outer world lies the breath. You draw the air outside you into your deepest inner self. Then you release it, if you're permitted to, back into the world. Whose breath is it now? Is it your breath you draw in, or the world's breath you let out? Who are you, and where are the boundaries of yourself? The separation between yourself and yourself in your breath, the breath you share with the world that includes you, that is you, all around you, without you, and within you. The breath traverses the universe and your soul, without borders, without visas, without armed guards checking your identity. Hold your breath in anticipation of your death, in anticipation of your arrival in the world, in anticipation of the catastrophe that awaits you, you call life. Hold your breath until you can't hold it anymore. Now, you are breathless. This album, this sequence of sounds, is a collaboration between my good friends, Frederic, Jair, and Katarina, and myself. It is a kaleidoscope of images, of sounds, of beats, of words, of intakes of breath, of exhalations, declarations, lamentations, and celebrations, of sounds, images, and words colluding to find meaning. Between breaths, between beats, between small events and catastrophes, between the moments of our life where we can all meet alone and breathless. When we cannot make love instead of war, we make art.
Yeah.
Breathless.
Hello?
Take a deep breath and hold it.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to repeat itself. It must have liked the track.
Yeah. I can mention at the cover of the Breathless album, it's a reference to Bettelheim, suicidal picture. And so I asked Igor if he could put a plastic bag on his head. The breathless, it was without air in the plastic bag. But I did not know you chose this track, but I thought you.
Can you remind me? Is this the suffocation? Is this his last words, or is this a more general? There are two versions of Breathless, so I'm wondering which version did your audience just hear?
I'm not sure it's Breathless. Yeah, this one is Breathless. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the track number 9 off the CD, off the Breathless album.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the one I picked off. It was off of the tracks that Frederic sent me.
No, I'm not sure it's the right title. There is another version. We have 3 versions of Breathless.
Well, how does this version go? Let's talk about the version that your audience just heard. Can you, Dustin? I wasn't able to hear the version that you played. So, is it the found poem, or is it a general? Is it a general introduction to the album?
Well, I think I'm not sure because I haven't heard the whole album. I've only heard some of it. It was it opens up with it talks about this is a collaboration effort with
I see. Yeah.
to it.
And we have 2 titles. One is called Breathless, and the other one is they Take a Deep Breath. And Take a Deep Breath, that was the one I thought I sent to you, whereas
that one was called. I believe that one was called Breathless.
Oh,
right.
Or briefly, I'm sure I'll be back in a second here. So I like it. The philosophy he espouses about collaboration, community-based language. It seems sort of like very postmodern. Generally, from my readings of postmodernism, when he says the different angles of approaching a truth, and the more vantage points we have, the more closer we espouse reality. And so I think that kind of fascinated me the way he phrased that.
Right.
I wrote an article some years ago for the Statesman in India called "The Author is Spirit," and it was basically kind of confronting some of the idea that's come from the postmodern. I call it the postmodern eclipse. Where we have the idea that there is no truth, or it could also be called the post-truth, reality, and kind of confronting some of that idea that there's, I refer Cubism and put it in contrast with sort of the postmodernists, and I think that when I say the author is spirit, the author is a mediator. I always use spirit. The word spirit is like a mediation, and helping us recognize our own realities. And it's really interesting to think that that this is where we are today, where there's just you have like the whole thing where we at the very beginning of the Trump presidency, where we had they had the picture of the inauguration, and there was not so many people there, and they said, oh, there are millions of people or whatever, and then what's her name, Kellyanne Conway, said, well, it's alternative facts.
Alternative facts. Yeah. But I think both Frederic and I and our collaborators are very opposed to that idea, because what you're doing by co-opting the postmodernist notion of there not being any truth, the notion, the principle isn't that there's no truth.
Right.
It's just that every truth is received and every truth is interpreted, just as physicists now take into account that the observed phenomena is affected by the observer.
Right.
There is no objectivity. There is no God's view. There is always a perspective which is sustained by the observer, and there's the bias of the observer, and that comes out of a kind of postmodern, sensibility, or a structural sensibility. But we're concerned with the fact that this has been co-opted or usurped to give the idea that every opinion is valid, or every opinion is truthful. And we don't believe that, Frederic. I'm speaking for you, but I certainly don't believe that, There is a truth. It's just that the truth is more elusive than we would like it to be.
Right.
You actually have to work. You have to work at arriving at the truth. And one of the ways we try to demonstrate this in our art is by showing that it takes multiple vantage points, multiple quantum views to actually see what is beyond the interpretation.
So I think you would actually agree with the concept, the authorist spirit, as I presented. That's roughly what I was aiming to say. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't have the same reading list syllabus that you do. My background comes from phenomenology, from the works of Edmund Husserl, leading up to Michel Foucault. I mean, Foucault was really the first kind of mainstream philosopher whose work was influential in everything from sociology to social work. That you know the observation, the truth of the observation cannot be achieved without taking the observer into account.
Right.
So you can't just take someone's account for granted and say, well, that's the way it is, because we know through the epistemology of science and what we consider truth is that every paradigm is usurped by another paradigm. Every paradigm is the Newtonian universe existed until Einstein.
Right.
And these paradigms are just plain glass. They're just filters. They're just maps of reality. They're not the reality itself. I'm sorry.
There's a phrase I've learned recently. The map is not the territory.
Yes, absolutely. And we know, and everybody, and the reason I'm so adamant about this, by the way, and I'm so enthused about it, is because more than ever, each of us has a direct, tangible experience of what that means. Anyone who has relied on a GPS for directions knows that sometimes the GPS has its own spirit, its own will, that isn't necessarily the most efficient way to get from point A to point B, to get to your destination. The map is not the territory, even if it's fueled by algorithms.
Right.
It sounds very Cartesian. This my artistic point of view is a bit far from this work after emotions and putting things nothing to do with together, but creating new forms and shapes and sounds and everything. So I'm looking for all those mistakes.
No, you're on the money, because you understand that any truth that we try to convey is a truth based on human experience, and a human experience is by definition emotional.
Right. It really yes.
We can jot down the data, but the data is not removed from human experience. And I think this is the big gap and alienation we have in this modern age, in this this what I call the age of speculative reality, speculative realism, where we no longer we still are within our skin and within our life experience, but we're taught more and more to value those things which exist outside of our experience.
That's what I. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. I've talked enough. Go ahead.
That's what I try to translate with sound in for example, there was a mix-up with the title. This is a take a deep breath, and the other one is breathless, and then I can't breathe. So there have been a mixed up with all those names. So, but what I try to do when I create this piece of music with Igor's poetry about to breathing. So I thought the thing is a saxophone. You breathe in a saxophone. So I try. And the saxophone, when you're getting older, so your breath is not so good anymore either. And then the analogy with the flute also is a wind instrument. That was the main idea of the composition of the track. And but I was more impressed about I Can Breathe, the last track, the remix I did
Right.
with
Okay.
that was more
Well,
powerful because
that's a demonstration of what we're talking about because, again, going back to the actual world or universal human experience, the breath, the fact that each of us breathe and every human breathes is just an inalterable truth. That there's a truth that exists outside of surveys or polls or interpretation or opinion. We all breathe. So it's a universal human experience. Now, I Can't Breathe, which was the last words of, please remind me, George.
George Floyd.
Yeah, George
yes,
Floyd. Now, George Floyd, I Can't Breathe, is an example of what Frederic and I are trying to do, because he wanted me. He had my book of poetry, which he wanted me to recite, but he wanted an additional track, and he wanted me to write something within a couple of days, which I found myself incapable of doing. However, I kept going back to George Floyd's death, which was cataclysmic. It had an enormous ripple effect in America, and I think worldwide. Here we had the authority murdering a citizen. Undeniably, the truth was there. The truth was there for everybody to see. And I noticed that in one of the protests that somebody had written down his last words. And I looked at this placard that had his last words: I can't breathe. Don't kill me. I can't breathe. You're killing me. And I wrote that down and I recited it as if it were a poem. A found poem. And there I was doing something that, well, Fred responded to, because what we did was take the words, his last words, and read by a white man, read by someone not within the political frame of Black Lives Matter. I was reading his last words as a human being's last words. And suddenly that language did exactly what we're talking about. It cut through all the interpretations and all the contrived contexts. It depoliticized it and turned it into, oh, wait a minute, this man's last dying breath, this human being that we all are, and he can't breathe.
I remember I cried all the way when I did this strike. I just cried. It was like a fountain all the time. So I was
it was stripped. Because
I
it was
very
stripped.
touched.
Yeah, exactly. It was effective. It is effective because it is stripped of interpretation. It's just the truth of this man's dying words. And the fact is that he's being choked to death. He's being denied his breath. Just as, regardless of your politics, people today are being denied their lives. And in that way, George Floyd became a living incarnation for all of us, a dying incarnation for all of us. I can't breathe.
No.
Symbolic representation.
And then the other track, the Sunflower Seeds, also is about politicians' statements there, and but an artistic way. Things have, if they understand, if people doesn't understand literary, so simple writing, so maybe they understand with music, maybe they understand better with pictures. So we make it more clear, our message there.
Absolutely.
The text isn't enough. It's how the text hits you. It's
For some people the text is it's not enough. For some people, for some other educated people, so they understand the text. But some people they don't understand. So you are make more clear.
The ideal aesthetically, if we're getting down to the very mechanics of the aesthetics, is that, and this certainly counts with Jair-Rohm's contribution as well. It's like I just start with a text poem, and then And then Frederic interprets that text and adds another layer to it. And then Jair-Rohm comes and adds another layer to it. And suddenly the poem is no longer mine. It's becomes what is common to the collaborators, what each of us sees as the vantage point of that truth. And in conveying that combination of vantage points, we believe that a greater truth is arrived at that can be understood.
Wonderful point of view in terms of truth and collaboration. I think that's it's a very powerful message we have, and we've presented today. And so with that said, we've reached 40 minutes, and so I hate to close down. Maybe we'll do this again some other time. We'll have another program, and talk a little bit more about the same subject. I think this has been really interesting. I think a lot of our audience probably got a lot of good out of it. So thank you so much, both of you, Igor and Fred.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Yes, we are proud too.
The opportunity.
We'll have some more programs in the future with the Frederic and others he collaborates with. So that'll be fun.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And thank you for your listening.
You have been watching World Inkers Network. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. And if you would like to donate today, we have support at paypal.me/nyparrot. That's paypal.me/nyparrot. You can donate any sum. You can also buy some of our books from World Inkers Network. Basically, we have a good number. We just released another of Damon Fried's books. It's called Sublimation is the subtext. I can't remember the name of the whole book. It's Fulcrum something or other. But yeah, just look up Damon Fried and find it. It's a wonderful book on aesthetics and architecture and so forth. And if you want to be on the program, take a look at the bottom there, that ticker running at the bottom. If you want to be a writer, send a bio and a headshot and a couple of sample works to publication.worldinkers@gmail.com. And I'm glad I could do this program today. I think we learned quite a bit, and it was very interesting to have this discussion. And so with that said, I hope you guys out there have a wonderful day and get to writing. Thank you so much for watching.
Great.
Listen to the people.
Are you still there?
Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Is anyone still there?
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity.